The views expressed in this show are those of the authors and do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of the Department of Defense, Department of the Navy, or the U.S. government. Well, why don't I spend a little bit of time talking about my new friend I made? All right, he's a good feller. He seems like a good feller so far. Let's see. I want to see how this started. That's what I'm going to do. Okay, it was definitely like a gun control thing. So Joe Walsh, who I legitimately don't even know who he is, but he is a former congressman and a radio host. So he's like a right-wing, sort of thought leader or something. And I don't follow him. Not that I am opposed to. But I've seen some of his posts from other people I follow, like reposting it, right, or retweeting it, or whatever. But he posted. Here's his post. It says, quote, "Joe, you don't need an AR-15 for home defense," end quote. "Respectfully, nobody else can determine what I need to defend my home and family. It's not your call, it's mine." So, first of all, I, as a guy who spent a lot of time coming up with what I think were very good, articulate, and sort of well thought out reasons why guns are important and why gun rights are important and gun control, a lot of gun control ideas are bad ideas. I think this is a lame argument. On its face, there's nothing to that. And everybody, like if you look at the comments, and it got ratioed, by the way.
Wait, which argument is lame? The you don't need it?
Yeah, no. Not the you don't need it thing. That is dumb. That's incorrect, right? And not the point. His rebuttal shouldn't have been, you don't get to determine what I need. It should be, it doesn't matter what I need. That's not how rights work, right? So we can get into that, but that's not how rights work. Need and rights have nothing to do with each other. You don't need rights at all. We spent most of human history without rights, and we still survived, right? It is definitely not a need. So anyways, but instead of saying, it doesn't matter what I need, right? He says, no one else gets to determine what I need. That's my call, not yours. I think that's a weak argument.
Yeah, that's kind of even wrong. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Other people can determine what you need.
We can all talk about needs. Yeah, that's a conversation that we all have about all kinds of crap all the time. Do we need, car insurance to drive? Someone decided I do. You know what I mean? And now I have to. Do I have a right to drive without insurance? Yes, but whatever. Some rights are thrown aside in society, right? And some are more sacred than that. But the point is, every damn rebuttal was like, I need a bazooka, or I need a nuke, or I need an aircraft carrier. And it's like, oh, damn it. Like every one of them, like they all think they're so clever.
Yeah.
But in all of their defense, this is a dumb point, right? And I'm sure he has a lot better points, but I think, yeah, this is dumb. So as I was going through, though, when I saw other arguments that weren't just I need a bazooka or I need a nuke, I don't know, I was bored. So I was going through some of the comments, and I saw one guy say, if you need an AR-15 for self-defense, then you likely need to go to the gun range and perfect your aim. #resist. So, that's one thing that I covered in my own gun control episode. So I just responded to him, Google tachypsyche. Nobody is as good of a shot under stress as they are at the range. The fight or flight response can cause tunnel vision, hearing loss, loss of bowel control, fainting, and freezing up. It's not as simple as target practice. And then he said, I know the feeling firsthand. If you wanted details, you'd have to PM me, as they are intimate details from my childhood. I'd rather not share personally. I will say my 12 gauge did the job and kept me and my brother and sister alive today. It was my job as the oldest to protect them.
Wow.
Yeah. So I said, thank you for sharing. You know better than most that, quote, practice shooting is a common talking point to limit magazine size or ban semi-auto weapons, but tachypsyche changes things. For the record, in close quarters, I'd rather have a pistol with a 15-round magazine beyond 20 yards, an AR-15. So then we kind of blah, 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 back and forth. I ended up, sending him a private message, and we did talk a little bit about, his experience, which I'm sure he'd prefer me not to share. But, it was pretty harrowing, and he was really young. And so he's one of those people that, even though he is a lefty and he is in favor of a lot of gun control measures, generally believes that people ought to be able to have guns to defend themselves and do exactly what he did, right? Anyway, so my response, without getting all into it, started with, thanks for sharing, right? And I said that, and then it turned into this very cordial thing. And then in our personal message back and forth, I was telling him basically how grateful I am that he was so cordial and polite, and that this didn't turn into a shouting match like it so often does. And then we just had a little conversation about that, about discourse and how it's going to crap in this country, and how he sees it on his side, and he is a #resist guy. Okay, so he's a blue wave, vote for any Democrat over Trump, no matter what. He has his preferences of Democrats, right? And he likes some more than others, but he sees it on his side, and he thinks his side is quite guilty of it. And as I've seen, so I started following him, he started following me, and I've seen a lot of the stuff he's posting is critical of his own side about how they're doing it, right? How they're talking. There was an article. This is what we've been talking about today. Basically, he liked an article by this woman, and it was basically saying, it was like Pete Buttigieg, that mayor from Indiana.
Yeah, the one who nobody knows how to say his name.
Yeah, I think it's Buttigieg. I don't know which one to emphasize, but I saw it on his profile. He put in parentheses boot, edge. So I don't know if it's Buttigieg or Buttigieg or Buttigieg, but it's boot, edge. Those are the three, syllables or whatever. Anyway, anyway, and he really seems like that guy, but Pete Buttigieg said in an interview or something, basically he's trying to not vilify all Trump supporters, and he's trying to win them over. And so this woman wrote an article, and she quoted him about how, sure, there may be some bigots out there who genuinely do just, hate immigrants or black people or whatever, Muslims or you name it. But that assuming that everyone who voted for him is like that does more harm than good. And so it's a Democrat telling other Democrats to stop doing that, or you're going to lose again, pretty much. Pete Buttigieg says that. This woman wrote a whole article about it, and he liked it, so it was on my page, and it's something I never would have seen. But I saw it was getting ratioed to hell, and everyone was just proving her point for her, and doubling down on how, no, they are all racists, they are all bigots. You're wrong. We shouldn't empathize or try and understand why, and so just losing strategy all the way. So he is like the voice of reason, who's trying to convince all these idiots that, hey, if you guys want to win, which we all do, right? Not me, but them, right?
Right.
Then you got to stop this crap. So I really like that about this guy. He's really nice, really thoughtful. And every time I've interacted with him, it's been splendid. But this is like the polar opposite of our mutual friend who, shall remain nameless, who came up in my gun control episode. And we've had some more run-ins lately, who is just so quick to vilify. And, so like a big part of, so I guess what I'm getting at is this is great for me that I finally have like an insider on the left who is actually reasonable and I can actually talk to and argue with, and it doesn't turn into, throwing names back and forth. And we, this nice. Just started. It's only been a few days, but, that is nice. And I honestly worry. He's the kind of opponent I want to have. He's the kind of opponent that I think he and I, people like him and people like me, and I don't mean with our exact ideological, lining. I mean people who feel that way, that dialogue is the way to truth, and that the most important thing is to talk about all this stuff and not to shut down people you disagree with or demonize people you disagree with. I think if that was it, if we had opponents like that, then we'd still disagree and we'd still argue, but this country would be so much better. And I mean the crap we're worried about, right? Like, I don't think it's far-fetched to imagine that before long something awful is going to happen. And I don't mean like full-fledged civil war or something, though I wouldn't take that off the table as extreme as people are trying to get. But even something far smaller. It could just be in the city of Portland. It could just be...
Well, the city of Portland is already kind of having riots and shit.
It could just literally be mobs of people attacking each other, which is happening, kind of, right? It could, and I think that can grow and grow, and you know, I think it can get to the... And then what's worse than that is our politics are just getting more extreme. It's not just that the Overton window is shifting to the left for lefties. It's also kind of shifting to the right for righties, and like the middle is getting more and more left behind, and it's only so politics themselves are getting more extreme, and all of the policies that are going to be put into place are going to be more extreme, which is going to have a counter reaction that is also extreme. Like, so when all these socialist policies start actually getting implemented, the right will not just go peacefully into the night. Okay, there will be a counter reaction to that, and it will get more extreme. All right, this is what happens, right?
Right.
So basically, he is the exact kind of opponent, you know, debate opponent, you know, sort of ideological opponent that I want to have, because the core value that we agree on is that dialogue is the most important thing. So I feel very grateful that I met this guy, because now there's just a guy that, as long as this keeps going well, I can always get the perspective of the other side without it being some straw man, you know, a straw man from the right, or a over the top, like extreme, straight out of the horse's mouth from the far left.
Like a person making a straw man of themselves.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Person being a self-parody.
Right, exactly. So I'm really grateful. And
well, that actually, that reminds me, before you finish, I don't know if you sounded like you were about done, but that reminds me of a couple things. First of all, I listened to an audiobook last week or something, The Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Hight. And I think it's from I think 2006, if I remember right. It's kind of an old book, but, you know, during the Bush presidency. And God, a lot of the stuff he said in there, it sounds downright prophetic now. You know, saying stuff about how he brought up something he calls naive realism, which is basically exactly what I said, or what I've said in a few past episodes of ours, where everyone kind of lives in their own world. Like, everyone has their own view of what the facts are, and the left believes that reality is something completely different from what the right believes it is.
Yeah.
And each side looks at the other and thinks, what planet are you living on? Because their realities just don't mesh with each other at all. And so he's saying this in like 2006, and I'm like, wow, that sounds downright prophetic now. But you know, that's what's contributing to all this. Like, that's why we keep drifting further and further apart. But like, so if we're talking about what is true in the world, there's a few different things that are going on. There's, like, if I'm having a conversation with you, there's my perspective of what is true. There's your perspective of what is true. And there's what's actually true in reality. Right? Yeah. And the chances that either one of us have a complete 100% understanding of what's true in reality is pretty low. Right?
Yeah.
Like, one of us could be closer than the other. One of us could be pretty close. One of us could be, you know, completely off base. But like, the point of any conversation should be for both of us to talk to each other with the understanding that we don't have a complete understanding of reality, and both of us can work together to get closer to what's actually real.
Yeah.
Right? But like the naive realist, as he calls it, believes that they have the truth, and everyone else who disagrees with them is just blinded by their ideology or their self-interest or something like that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's kind of always been the case, but I think social media has just turned it into a much bigger phenomenon than it was. You know what I mean? I think it's always been a thing. I mean, it's so much easier now to just join a mob, you know, and to have an echo chamber where you don't have to hear anything that you disagree with. So,
yeah, and you know, like, so your story about the guy that you made friends with was pretty, was like hopeful. So I'm going to bring the hope back down a little bit.
Yeah, please.
I don't want you riding too high.
It's getting a little too chummy in here. Yeah.
Right. So there's a guy that I'm friends with on Facebook, and I've mentioned him in the past on this show. I won't say his name, but so he's super lefty, right?
Yep.
And I've talked to him, you know, I've had debates with him in the past. And so it's probably a week or two ago, I wasn't participating because I'm kind of past the point of participating with him because I don't think he can see reason.
Right.
But he posted something basically saying that, like, saying outright, he was being a self-parody, basically. Like, if you still support Trump at this point, you're a disgusting, vile person. Like, he says the word disgusting several times. You know, just going on this tirade against people who support Trump. And another friend of his comments on it and says, like, you know, basically he's like not a hardcore Trump fan, but he's, you know, he's one of those people who's kind of reasonable.
And
sometimes
like, Trump.
You know, I'm not going to just completely go all or nothing on the guy. Like, I'm going to say he's a human being. He's capable of doing good things and bad things. Sometimes he does both.
Yeah.
He comments on there saying basically that, and says, I'm not disgusting. Like, I don't think I'm a disgusting person. Like, do you really believe that about me? And, you know, I'm getting context clues, like, these guys know each other clearly. And the lefty guy comes back and says, basically, you know, I don't think you're, you know, asking how much he supports Trump, and like, I don't think you're that person, but if you do support him, then yes, I do think you're disgusting. I just don't think you're that guy.
Oh, so you don't.
And it was
really
this
support him.
It was this super, like, it's a super manipulative thing to say.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, people who have X opinion are stupid, disgusting, vile people. People who disagree with me are stupid, disgusting, vile people. You're not one of those people, are you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't want me to think that about you, so agree with me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awful.
Yeah.
It's nasty. Yeah, that's the big problem.
Like, Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah, that was just actually my most recent little tweet versation back and forth with this guy, the friend of mine that I made, and not just him, though. He's been mostly chiming in, but not talking to me directly, but we're both talking to the same guy who did the same thing. You know, it was about that Pete Buttigieg, you know, the article that quoted him and was saying, you know, we need to understand Trump supporters if we have any chance in 2020. And, you know, he just liked it, but I commented and I put at him to try to get him into it. And I said, it's funny. I was like, I think it's so funny how how everyone is completely missing the point and doubling down. Like said, they're doing their very best to prove the author's point. And, and he was like, basically, yeah, like they need to understand, blah, blah, blah. And then a couple of people have chimed in and been like, basically, but they are all bigots, one of those, one way or another, it's saying it in different ways, but that's the gist of it is, no, we shouldn't understand. They are bigots. Yeah. Empathy is dumb, doubling down on this extreme sort of take that kind of like what that guy thinks, that everyone who disagrees is evil. That's the only possible explanation is evil. So anyway, so this exact conversation, I've been kind of going back and forth with that guy, and this other guy's been chiming in, but more like on his side, still telling him the empathy is good, but at the same time saying things like, we need a living wage for everyone and healthcare as a right, a bunch of things I completely disagree with. But, in doing so, trying to be like, hey, I'm on your side and we should be empathetic. And I can appreciate that. It's a good tactic. You know what I mean? Where I'm more like, you're wrong. Right. So I don't know, like what I said, because he came back with some stuff like, that the economic problem has already been, rejected. That's not why Trump supporters are Trump supporters. He said, he used the term, he said, a large number voted for Trump because they're afraid of cultures changing or shifting demographics and blah, blah, blah. Much nicer way to put it, but more technical way to put it than they're racists, they're bigots, said demographic changes and things like that. To which my first thought was, what the hell? How could you possibly prove what the motives were of people who voted? I don't know how you could possibly prove that. He was saying it's disproven that people did it for economic reasons.
Yeah, like it's just a done deal.
Yeah.
Like that's been decided.
And he said a large number of, which I don't know where that comes from. I can buy that. Maybe it's a large.
Yeah, where does that come from, and what do you even mean by a large number?
Yeah,
I mean,
what's a large?
More than 50%, more than 75%. Like what numbers are we even talking about?
Right, exactly. So what I came back with was, and then he said some other crap about. Oh no, what did I say? Actually, I'm going to read it because this is pretty good. So he said economic anxiety was disproven. A large number are voting Trump because they do not like demographic change or losing cultural power. You can lie to them and get votes to try to persuade them out of their fear, but rolling back the clock, parentheses, MAGA, is not an option. And then he had another thing. Yeah, actually, let me see.
Disproven, huh?
Yeah, disproven.
Citation needed.
Even for those who do have legit economic concerns, the options are similar. Lie about the effects of automation and subcontracting by blaming immigrants, or try to create a soft landing for those in dying industries. We're not going to dig more coal. It's not going to happen. So my response really to the first one, the economic anxiety was disproven thing, was... and this all started when I said, I love how everyone is completely missing the damn point and just doubling down. They're just dead set on proving the author right. Anyway, so when he said the thing that anxiety was disproven and that a large number are voting because they don't like the demographic change, I said, a large number are voting for Trump because they're tired of being called racist, sexist, bigot, homophobes every time they disagree with a leftist. A large number voted Trump as a giant, quote, fuck you to the political establishment on both sides that pander to everyone else. And then, which again, since we're just pulling large numbers out of our ass and we're not pulling it from anything, clearly there are people who that is exactly what they were thinking. I didn't even vote for him. And I thought that. I thought, fuck you. You know what I mean? And so, I didn't vote for him, but I get it. I get that, So anyway, and then he came back with, quote, disagree with the left, end quote, on what? That all Americans deserve equal rights, fair treatment, and equal protection under the law, regardless of race, creed, religion, gender identity, etc. The right,
because that's what you believe.
Yeah, the right's catastrophic error was to cede this bedrock American value to the left. And then I said, nope, that's a BS strongman. You're attacking a position that nobody holds. Disagreeing about abortion makes you sexist. Disagreeing about Israel/Palestine makes you an Islamophobe. Disagreeing about the role of the state in our lives makes you every evil term under the sun. To which I haven't gotten a response yet. But you see, this is like what I'm dealing with. So and I'm only even in this conversation because the guy who I am friendly with, liked this initial post. So he disagrees with this guy. I mean, he may agree about a lot of stuff, but this guy objects to the article a woman wrote saying we need to empathize. The guy I made friends with does want to empathize and win people over, winning strategy, right? So that guy chimed in a bunch too, my buddy, and I haven't even caught up on all those things. But it's funny that it's like I have this reasonable ally, and it was almost exactly the same thing that you're talking about. Like this guy thinks, so he's clearly convinced that we disagree with the left, we being everyone who disagrees with him, about, basic fundamental values of equality and equal protection and all that stuff. So yeah, absolute nonsense. It's like, it's just, again, virtue signaling. It's like, who do you think you're arguing with, man? Like Milo Yiannopoulos? Like you find one random freaking idiot on the face and that's what you think represents not just Trump supporters, because we're talking about the duly elected president of the United States. He won. So a lot of people voted for him, even if they're not diehard Trump fans. You know what I mean? Whatever they were thinking, there was a lot of different thoughts and a lot of different people's minds, I imagine. Some may have been, MAGA. Some may have been, I really don't like Hillary. That would be horrible. You know what I mean? Some may have been, this is bullcrap. We always get a giant douche or a turd sandwich. Not that that's my opinion, because I can't say that. But some people may think that, and they're like, this is all bullcrap.
It's my opinion. I can say it.
Thank you. Take that. And this is all bullshit. So fuck you, establishment. The Republicans don't want this guy to win. I'll vote for him in the primaries. And then when he wins, like, haha, like everyone's rooting against him. I'll vote for this guy. The bull in the china shop. It's like, that is clearly lots of people had the bull in the china shop thought when they were voting for Trump.
Yeah. Something you said, another thing I thought of while you were talking a little while ago about the backlash. Mm-hmm. You remember when, on Sam Harris's podcast, like this must have been like a year or two ago by now. Yeah. But he had Neil Ferguson, the historian, on his podcast, and they were talking about historical counterfactuals.
Yes, that was a very good episode.
Yeah, I enjoyed that one. So Neil Ferguson was telling Sam, what you're really saying when you say that Hillary would have been a better president than Trump is that things would have been better. Right? Yeah. Like things would have worked out better if she had been elected and not him. So you're playing with a counterfactual, which is always tough to do because it's so hard to accurately predict everything that would have happened.
Yeah.
And he made the point that, well, what would the backlash have been on the right if Hillary had been elected? It was a really interesting episode to listen to, but I actually had this thought sometime in the past couple of weeks, but I'm thinking, what if we're seeing the same thing, but the other way right now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we're seeing right now a lot of the left doubling down on every crazy thing that they think about people on the right. We have the Democratic Party going fully crazy.
Yeah.
That I don't know. That all seems like backlash to Trump.
Yeah.
For me, like Trump is backlash to what was going on in the culture before that, and now we're seeing like backlash to the backlash.
Yeah.
Right.
And then there'll just be another backlash.
Yeah.
To that backlash. But
yeah, it's like we've hit the resonant frequency of our culture.
Yeah, and I think maybe to a lot of people who it was a fuck you vote, they're getting exactly what they wanted. Right. I mean, the bull is in the china shop. You know what I mean? And the counter to that is not going to be, more China. It's going to be another bull. who's going to break other things, right?
Yeah, I mean, just look at the list of Democratic presidential candidates coming up for 2020.
Yeah, who also want to throw norms out the door, just like, I mean, in different ways, but we're talking about getting rid of the Electoral College, stacking the Supreme Court, turning the Senate into another House of Representatives with proportional representation. We're talking about socialism, Medicare for all. It's pretty much universal now. And every Democratic candidate, you know what I mean? Pro-Palestine, anti-Israel. Every sort of norm is going out the window, but it's like the counter to the other norms that have been going out the window. So it's like, yeah, the bull in the china shop is doing its thing. So that may end up being horrible, but we'll see.
Yeah.
See how it turns out.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of speculation about that. Like, yeah. I know Tim Pool talks about it a lot with like civil war, which I don't like to speculate because I don't feel like I'm qualified to speculate about that. But I don't know what would even look like. I know Dan Carlin talked about this. Like, again, this was like several years ago on his Common Sense podcast. Basically speculating about what a civil war would look like if it happened, and how it's not going to be like the actual civil war that already happened. It's not going to be like armies, like organized armies fighting each other.
Yeah,
most likely it would be an insurgency kind of thing.
Yeah,
which like we said before, we're kind of already seeing in some places.
Hashtag resistance.
Yeah.
Surge.
Or Portland, there was that thing in Portland, or there's ongoing crap in Portland. There was Charlottesville in 2016 or 2017, was it? I don't remember, but
17. I don't know.
There's been other.
I think Trump was president, so.
Yeah, I think it was 17.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's been these incidents like all over the country in different cities, and yeah, I mean, at what point? Like, there's already been plenty of violence, is the point.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. At what point does the violence get to a level where you call it a civil war?
Yeah. Yeah. Does it have to take some sort of secession? Because we had rebellions before the Civil War that we didn't call civil war,
Yeah.
Civil War has to be pretty full scale, like with full on leadership and stuff. I don't know. Yeah, that's interesting. There's certainly people who are happy to do that. They're happy to go there. You know what I mean? I think these Antifa types are very willing and happy to go to some sort of war. I don't know what they're going to use as weapons, but certainly not AR-15s.
Right.
But yeah, whatever they think they're going to use, against other Americans or the government if Trump is reelected or something.
Yeah, I think the other thing is, I think a lot of people, because I've actually talked to people on the right. I haven't talked to this guy in a while, but there's some guy that I used to go to church with back home when I was still going to church. But who is like I think he actually became a member of the Proud Boys at some point. But this was a couple years ago that I was talking to him about this. But he actually said he was super gung ho about going to war.
Yeah.
Against the left.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. Like, and I was telling him, like, dude, think about what you're saying. Like, I feel like you're not thinking this through.
Yeah.
Like, people will talk a big game about that. They're like, yeah, let's go to war, like patriotism.
Yeah.
That's kind of the extreme right side. And yeah, I'm like, I don't think you're thinking this through. I feel like some people are too gung ho about that. I don't think many, but some people are way too gung ho about that. Like,
yeah.
Have you really thought about what that means? Like, your life would be destroyed.
Yeah.
Like, completely changed beyond repair. Like, I don't know about destroyed. Maybe, you know, if you ended up winning and, you know, got what you wanted, maybe it could be kind of okay. But even if that happens, it would still be changed in a completely irreversible way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not rooting for it. I would love it if conversation could win the day, and that's literally, I think, why I started a podcast. You know, I want to talk about stuff, and I think it's like we use our words so as not to draw swords. It's a good thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think it's too late for that. You know what I mean? But sometimes I think. You think about what exactly caused our founding fathers to go to war and fight for their independence. And if you look at the Declaration of Independence, like Thomas Jefferson lists all the offenses that the British Crown, you know, had against the people of the United States. And what's funny is if you look at everything our government is currently doing, you know what I mean? A lot of it is worse than that. Now, one thing they aren't doing now is, what do you call it? Impressing sailors and making them bear arms against their fellow countrymen. So that's not happening. They're not capturing American sailors and making them fight in the Navy against Americans. The Crown was worse in that case. We have representation, sure. But I don't know. I think when more than half the people don't vote at all, then we're not really being represented. That seems to me like taxation with half representation. That's just it's not even half of voting age people vote in the presidential election, which gets more turnout than any other election. So that's even, that's higher, than any other. Point is, if you look at that list, a lot of it's bad. But when you think about, drones striking American citizens, the NSA spying and taking metadata and emails and phone records and all this crap, the scandal. One of the scandals under the Obama administration that people say Obama had no scandals, and it's like, have you heard of Edward Snowden? You know what I mean? That was a scandal. Turns out the NSA is totally collecting all of our information. So, like, the police state, the spying, the endless wars. I don't know. I'm not saying that any of that is justifying war, but I am saying if our founders were alive today, I could see them talking about rebellion. You know what I mean? Not saying they would be at that point yet, but they certainly talked about it for a while before they actually did it, in the 1770s. Now, at the time, they didn't have a lot to lose. Their sovereign was, across the ocean, and they had very little loyalty to it. You know what I mean? And now there's a much greater sense of unity, and I think, what was it? What's that old flag? It says like 3% or something on it. It's just a big 3. It's just like the Roman numeral 3 on it. It means like 3% of Americans fought in the revolution, and the rest didn't do anything. It's just like, you know what I mean? So it's like, I think there's plenty to be upset about. And to the pessimist, I'm not saying a pessimist should or would wish for civil war or some sort of revolt or whatever. But I could see a pessimist thinking we're never going to go back. We're never going to change back to where we belong, which is a country where freedom truly is the highest value, and where the government isn't spying on its people, and we're not policing the world and, engaging in regime change wars all over and sending American lives and treasure or whatever. You name your complaint, whatever. Like, we're never going back. You know what I mean? It's clear now that voting for a Democrat or a Republican isn't going to change that. It's clear. So how do we go back? Maybe a bull in the china shop wrecking the whole damn thing.
Yeah.
Maybe that's some fighting. Maybe it's not. And I'm not hoping for it. I certainly don't. I don't think it's too late for words. You know what I mean? I think Ron Paul talked about
I
intellectual revolution, a revolution of sorts, but not a violent one.
Yeah,
an intellectual one. And I think it's begun. I don't know. I wish it would grow faster, but I think it is growing.
Yeah, I agree. I tend to not think it's too late for conversation either.
Yeah.
I'd certainly like to believe that, for sure. And that's part of doing this podcast too.
Yeah.
Trying to have conversations. That conversation I told you about before with our other mutual friend.
Yeah.
Actually gave me a little bit of hope too, because I don't know. It was like we disagreed, but we were getting somewhere. Like we were getting somewhere using reason, and it was nice.
Yeah.
Like we got to a certain point, and it just the conversation just kind of petered out. And I don't know how much of an impact I actually made, and like he didn't really make an impact on me, but so I don't know how much concrete good it actually did, but the conversation was happening at least, right?
Yeah.
So that was nice. And that happens, that happens from time to time.
Yeah.
And it's nice when it does.
Yeah.
But I was listening to another audiobook, Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker. And the book is basically about how good we have it objectively today.
Yeah.
And it's really compelling. It's like by just about every objective measure, we are worlds better off now than we were 50 years ago, or especially 100 years ago or 200 years ago. And you look at stuff like that, and it kind of puts things in perspective. It's like for how bad we think things are, they could be a whole lot worse, and they have been a whole lot worse for most of human history.
Yeah.
The one thing I don't think he really takes into consideration in that book, and disclaimer, I haven't finished it yet, so he could address this later, and I just haven't got to that part yet. But the thing I haven't heard him address yet is people's perception of what things are like versus how they're actually like. Because we can be better off, far better off than we ever have been by all of these objective measures, and it almost doesn't matter if people don't know it.
Yeah.
Like if people think things are terrible, they're going to act as if things are terrible.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, what's the effect of people thinking things are terrible when they're actually not that terrible?
Yeah. That's a funny thing to think about. I spend a lot of time kind of either literally arguing with or just thinking about what a lot of leftists are saying and talking about America being a very bad, no good place full of racists and bigots and homophobes and how it's just awful. And then I think to myself, or I say out loud, right, or type it, that, when they talk about, marginalized people, whatever, say something along the lines of America in 2019 is the best place and time in all of human history to be a woman or to be a black person or to be anything, you name it, to be a Muslim even, in America is far better and safer than being a Muslim in Iraq. You know what I mean? Yeah. Especially if you're the wrong kind of Muslim and the other one is in power, or the other one is, I forget which one. If you're the wrong kind, that's as bad to someone like ISIS, right? Or to an ISIS person as being a Christian, if not worse. It's worse, because then you're an apostate, Christians can be taxed, right? And they don't have to be killed, but apostates have to be killed, right? So it's like, if you're the wrong kind of Muslim, you could be in a much greater danger than even being a Christian in certain parts of the Middle East. So the point is, I think about that a lot. I see people complaining, and I think things aren't so bad. Stop complaining so much. But then, obviously, I have a lot to complain about as well. All those things I talked about, like the surveillance state and the endless wars and the regime change, foreign policy and things like that. So I think, like all things, it's probably just one of those things that deserves some nuance. We need to be grateful for what we have. It's an important thing to think about, is how good things are compared to how they have been. But I don't think that means we can't think about how some things are worse than they used to be. You know what I mean? Or some things, even if they're not worse than they used to be, are not as good as they could be, and we should still strive to make them better. So I never want to use it as like a tool to say, how good things are. As a tool to say there's nothing wrong and we shouldn't be changing anything. But it's certainly it's important to think about, though, that it isn't all that bad. Like, a lot of people think this is absolute hell. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, the funniest thing was when President Trump said the shithole country comment, which was, untoward and uncalled for. How is your response? America is a shithole country, from Americans. It's like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? We're the absolute leaders of the free world. I will give you this. We're $22 trillion in debt. That sucks. But, other than that, we got it going on. So it doesn't mean there's nothing to complain about. Doesn't mean there's things we can't do better. But America is not a shithole country. And if it were, we wouldn't have bajillions of people trying to cross our borders and get into America to become citizens, or to just get a chance to live here and be here. It's amazing. You won the freaking lottery if you're an American. You won the lottery, right?
Right.
You were born in the U.S. of A., or you made your way here and you get to live here. Like, not saying there's nothing to complain about, but yeah, it's funny. It's a balancing act, because I get it. And like what Steven Pinker says, things are great, and that is important to think about. But people go extreme one way or the other. I think often Ben Shapiro does that, and he says the same sort of things, that things are great. This is the freest country in the history of the world. And I think it's not even as free as it used to be. And I don't mean, in 1860. I mean, even in 1990, we were more free, you know what I mean, than we are now. I'm not talking about, when people were enslaved or when people didn't have voting rights. I'm talking about things that used to be fundamental and true, even through those days and beyond, are less important, like property rights, or, just generally being left alone. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think there's plenty. We got to find that balance, because, I find
and
the exact same thing that I'm complaining about.
Yeah, that's like, and that's, in a functional culture, and Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot. Like, in a functional culture, there's like a left and a right, if you want to call it that, as far as politics and culture goes. And the function of the right is to say, well, things are working pretty well right now. We probably shouldn't change them too much, because if we do, they could just blow up in our face. And the function of the left is to say, I don't know why I use my left hand for the right and my right hand for the left. That doesn't make any sense.
The left is my right, as I'm looking at it.
Anyway, but the function of the left is to say, well, things are not as good as they could be, so we should figure out what changes we can make to make things better. Yeah. That's like progressive versus traditionalist, or right?
Conservative. They're trying to conserve the status quo. Yeah.
Yeah, conservative versus liberal.
That's funny. Yeah.
That's what it really is, and that's why we are dysfunctional. Like, that's why our politics are dysfunctional, because the two sides don't really serve those purposes, or if they're trying to serve those purposes, they're not talking to each other, because the part that makes it all work is the fact that the sides talk to each other and compromise to balance out those two necessary things.
Yeah, there are things we need to conserve, and there are things we need to progress, and change.
Right. And if we're not talking to each other, if we're just screaming at each other from across this chasm of this divide, where we think everybody on the other side is a evil, disgusting, vile person, like, we're never going to balance what needs to be balanced.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that might be a good place to wrap it up. That was like a total kind of random conversation after that.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and listen to this and figure out what to post.
Yeah. But that's more like a normal conversation we normally have, which was the whole point of the show.
Yeah.
Was to just do what we always do. That was
nice.
That was probably the closest to what we always do.
Well done, us.
Yeah.
If you like the show, there are many ways you can support it. You can talk about it on your own blog or podcast, you can share it on social media with your friends, or you can leave a rating or review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you happen to listen to it. If you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe to the channel and hit the thumbs up button if you like this video. Or if you really like us, you can support the show directly by going to patreon.com/philosophication. Thank you so much for your support.